once the recording begins. Lovely. Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Policy Performance Scrutiny Panel. Usual housekeeping is that we're not expecting a fire alarm, but if it does sound, please leave the building to the fire exits, and we'll meet outside at the fire assembly point. This meeting will be video recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's website. There's no members of the public here to object. So I don't need to read the rest of that. We'll go swiftly on to apologies then. I have apologies from Councillor Asman. I see Councillor Kinlock's not here, but he's probably busy at work.
I think Councillor Spencer also apologies, even more.
Lovely, thank you.
That's an excuse.
And it looks like everyone else is here. Are there any declarations of interest that any members wish to make? No, if you do something during the meeting, just tell us then. Item 3 then is the minutes. So we move to the minutes from our meeting on the 13th of October. You may wish to abstain if you weren't here. Do I have a proposer that I may sign those minutes as a true record? Cllr Broomfield and seconded Cllr Duguid. Any discussion on those minutes? No, all those agreed? Lovely. There's no public participation because there's no public. Item 5 is the Chair's report. I have not a huge amount to report, I have to say, except so this is our last meeting of the year. So may I be possibly the first to wish everyone a restful Christmas break. Yeah, just to thank everyone for the work they've done on scrutiny and on the various task and finish groups we've run this year. We'll pick that up again in January. That's literally what I have to say on my Chair's report. So we'll move on to item 6, which is our update from task and finish groups, which we have 2 of, I believe, which was the One Horton Heath morphing into housing policies, which we have later anyway, which James was leading. Give us a quick update on that, please.
Yes, I mean, there are 2 items. First of all, the stress testing, which is still outstanding from way back, and with interest with rates moving up and possibly house prices going down, the committee is anxious that we do that. I know there's a date scheduled in for the 19th of December. That's fine, and I'm hoping we can get a fairly good attendance of the subcommittee for that meeting, because it will be an important one. On the other one, our new mission, our new role, Steve and I tackled this with enthusiasm and excitement. And get carried away, though. And Sue and I spent some time trying to prepare the ground on that and understand the issues, because not having been involved before, it is quite complicated to get your head around. And I would propose I read out actually the statement that we agreed and Steve endorsed and was happy with.
Do we want to do that on the item itself? Or we won't have anything to do there?
Okay, fine.
Lovely, thank you. And then the other task and finish we had in flight was the one Steve was chairing around development management.
Well, continuing the extraordinary analogy from last month, I was unable to find anybody else's homework to copy, so I had to write it myself, and I handed it to Cllr Gomer on Tuesday, so that's to him.
Yeah, that's been received. What I propose is we have some space in the January meeting, so I propose we get that circulated as a proper written report with some recommendations in it, and we bring it for a proper discussion in January.
As long as it doesn't come back annotated in green biro with a few pithy comments, so I'll be quite happy.
Yeah, only red, by the way. Yes, thank you. Any questions on task and finish? No, lovely. We'll go on to, I'm going to bring up item 10 so that few people don't have to sit here through any more of our meeting than they have to. So I'm going to bring strategic land up and do that next. So that's item 10 as printed. And I'm going to ask Clarissa to introduce that item.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Clarissa the project and programs officer in the Project Management Office. We circulated a report on it as an update on the strategic land project. My involvement in that is assisting Angela Taylor to project manage all the work streams that are part of the strategic plan. So I hope you will have a chance to look at the report. So I'll just give a brief summary, and then we've got Cllr Payne, who can step in once I've done a summary on the SAG element. So he's seeking approval for the revised interim charge for the SAGs. So in the report, you can see that 238 hectares of land has been purchased. This was for nitrate and phosphate mitigation. And out of that, there's a number of work streams that have come out of purchasing the land where we can make better use of that. Paragraphs 11 to 21 are about the nitrates and phosphates, and Chris can answer any questions on that as well, because he's the one who proposed all of those. The strategic land board's been set up to govern and monitor the different streams of the project, and there's reporting mechanisms in place. Some of the reporting goes to community projects board, some of the updates come to the strategic land board, and some to the climate emergency board. Paragraph 8 says that we put a tender out for a consultant. I can confirm that the consultant has now been appointed to survey the parcels of land and inform the best use, and they are due to complete their survey in spring 2023. Out of all of this, we've got a number of projects. So the green energy projects have commenced, and this is to do ground mounted solar panels, private wire network, which will be connected to the council's existing proposed solar farms adjacent to One Horton Heath development, and will serve non-residential property and electric vehicle charging for One Horton Heath. We also have private heat networks serving all the properties at One Horton Heath. 160,000 trees need to be planted by 2030. We're hoping that the survey will inform us which parcels of land can be used for tree planting and where the best plant be. So these could be hedgerows, woodland planting, or community planting days. To support this, the tree nursery was set up, and it's very established, and it's now outgrown the land that it's on, and this is also the One Horton Heath land, so it needs to be relocated. So again, the survey will inform where we can actually locate that tree nursery. There are biodiversity net gain and wetland creation. We can make use of the land for those as well. And a draft biodiversity strategy was approved by Cabinet. All of those ambitions to be delivered can be read in paragraph 34. I'm not going to be today, so understand all of those elements of it. So you can get information on those in paragraph 32 to 34. The next bit is the SANGs, but Chris, I'm just going to jump past that to the hedging cycle route and then come back to you for the SANGs. So the hedging to East cycle route has been an ambition of the council. Feasibility has been done and explored the preferred route, but there's been a number of constraints identified on this, which include land ownership, floodplains, zinc and triple PSI sites, water crossings, ancient woodland. But having said that, the secured route has been safeguarded for future delivery. That will be considered at a future date. So are there any questions on those elements?
So, pardon my lack of understanding, it might be a question for Chris anyway. So does that mean that we're now planting trees not to combat air quality and climate change, but to deal with our nitrates?
No, so we bought the land to take it out of farm use to give us the nitrate benefit,
Right.
and then we're trying to double up on the land. What else can we do with it? So planting trees is just an added benefit to get the nitrate credit, plus we can plant trees on it, which does the climate change of the air.
So the original trees that we were going to plant, are they still? So are we planting twice as many?
No, same trees.
So we're double accounting on the trees.
No, we're just finding the home for them. Wherever the 160,000 are going, we're finding out the best place to put them. And some of it will be on this land.
But on this land, unless I've misunderstood, it's being used to mitigate our nitrate issue.
Yes.
But the original trees, yes, were going to be planted to deal with our climate change.
So to mitigate the nitrate issue, we take it out of farm use, and that gives us the nitrate credit.
Right.
And then we think, what else can we do with this land? Now we've sterilised it from farming, what's the best use? What other things can we do? So we can put solar, we can put trees. So that's why we're sticking loads of the trees on this land. So it's like doubling up as much use as we can get out of the land.
But we're still only planting the same number of trees. Okay. I think it's an opportunity to actually do more than that.
Potentially, but I suppose that's what that will do when we get that survey back. That will inform us what's best on which piece of land. And also there's lots of grants coming through for tree planting. It might be we do more, but it's about maximising benefit, isn't it? So when we get that survey back, that's what will inform us. And it might be that we do more trees. It might be we do fewer than 160 there, and we put trees in other places, like we put some up Kitchen Valley. So I suppose it's, yeah, we need to get the outcome of that survey, and then we'll pour over a map and plot what goes where.
Okay. I think I understand, and I think I might be happy.
Not totally happy.
No, I know.
Well, there's point number 20 here. It says that the sale of nutrient credits is projected, I guess, yes, to be 38 million, with to date 3.82 million sold. Can we just have some sort of little risk analysis as to how certain we are of getting to the 38 million? I mean, is that the lap of the gods to some extent, or is that pretty much predetermined?
I suppose Chris might answer better than me, but I think lots of it comes from how much development we're getting. So the developers need to mitigate. We provide a very simple scheme for them. It's all in place, so they can just sign up. To date, we've had quite a lot of take up. But do you want to give a more educated view, Chris?
I don't know about more educated, but a view maybe. Yeah, so what we've done so far is the least risky approach to valuing the credits. We've not spent any capital yet to create extra credits on land, which we can do. We've got about 10,300 credits to sell from just buying land and stopping farming. Whilst we've only completed about £3.5 million worth of sales, we've actually taken reservations, including Horton Heath, which has a significant nitrate load to be mitigated as well, of just over 27 million. The difference between what we've sold and what we've made offers for is the amount of time it takes for planning, for projects to go through the planning system. So a new development just about to be submitted to the local authority needs to demonstrate at submission point how it will mitigate. So they inquire to us, we make them an offer, and then they put that in as evidence to support their application. They don't buy the credits from us until they've got their planning consent and probably are about to start on site. So there's a lag of anything from a minimum of 9 months, in an extreme case to 3 years, between us making an offer and somebody giving us their money. So that's why there's a significant gap. What we're doing at the moment is we're actively promoting the balance of credits we have to get them sold. And we're also chasing up people that we've made offers to every 3 months to make sure that they actually still need them and that we've not reserved them for a site that's not going to come forward in a quick enough timescale. So there is risk, but the biggest risk really is one of timing, not of is the demand there. And if we did run out of credits, which is quite likely, unless the whole nitrate issue disappears, we've got several opportunities to create more credits to continue selling them, but that would be on top of the current business case.
So, if I may have a supplementary, so we're pretty certain we've virtually got options on 27 million pounds of the 38, from what you're saying, but timing is dependent for the very good reasons you explained. For the balance, the 16 million or whatever it is, are prices inclined to be going up for buying these credits, or stabilising, or what's the score?
Volatile is probably the correct answer there. So a number of additional schemes have come to the market recently. We've always pitched the pricing of our scheme, albeit it is a commercial offering. We're not out there to try and make development unviable or profiteer. So our pricing has always been at the lower end of what the market availability rate is. which has meant as other people have pushed their prices up and down, ours have stayed pretty constant. Back in March of this year, a new Natural England calculator tool came out, which increased the number of credits per dwelling on average. A lot of private sector schemes took that as an opportunity to increase their prices because demand went up. Again, we chose not to because we didn't think that was the right thing to do. But at £3,000 of credit, which is what our nitrates are selling for, nobody's yet asked us to reduce the price. In fact, most people come to us because we're at the lower end of the going rate, but we're also the most cost effective and accessible for the legal process.
So, Chris, sorry, who do we sell these to? It's not just internally in Eastleigh, is it?
No. So nitrates, I deal with nitrate and phosphate separately. The catchment for nitrates is actually 9 local authorities that can use our scheme. So we've currently signed agreements with New Forest District Council, New Forest National Park, Winchester City, Southampton City, Basingstoke and Dean, Winchester and East Hants. We think Test Valley are just about to sign up with us because they've run out of their own credits and now they're happy to use ours, which they weren't a year ago. But it's essentially the developers in those local authority areas buying the credits from us, not the local authority. But from a nitrate point of view, it's a very large catchment, which is why we would quite happily create more credits at the point where we've sold the ones from passive means. Phosphates is a much smaller catchment area, so the phosphate credits that we have can only be used in the Itchen catchment within Eastleigh. So we've got a lot less phosphate credits anyway, but we can sell them to developers in Eastleigh within the Itchen catchment.
Okay, thank you.
Any more on that? And then was there more presentations?
Yes, so Chris can go through the revised plan.
You want me to talk about the SANG? Yeah. So a bit like the nutrient issue, SANG is a challenge born out through the planning process. It's a Natural England thing, let's call it. And SANG stands, for those that aren't aware, for Suitable Alternative Natural Green Space. We can use SANG for a variety of different things. The primary driver at the moment, though, is to mitigate recreational impacts in the New Forest. And so an interim strategy went to Cabinet in June of this year, which was approved. And that saw us proposing to create a 14.5 hectare SANG site on Allington Lane and undertake a number of improvements at Itchen Valley, which created an equivalent of about 13.5 hectares of SANG. And Cabinet approved that along with the interim charge. Since the interim strategy was approved, we've done some more detailed work on the catchment areas for the SANGs. So there is guidance from Natural England on the geographical area that a SANG can provide mitigation to, and it's fairly small. We've also done some more work on the distribution of development within the borough and where those catchments would have fallen. So for that reason, coupled with trying to refine and improve the solar park business case a little bit, we actually are proposing to move the new SANG location away from Allington Lane and to create one up at Stoke Park Farm in Fair Oak, right in the north of the borough. We don't have a detailed design yet for the Stoke Park Farm. So what we are proposing to do in next month's Cabinet is revise the charge based on an assessment of catchments and costs, roll that out and start collecting contributions from developers to create the new asset. And then when we've got some firm costs and a firm design, we'll look to revise the charge again to more exact figures. So in simple terms, another development mitigation issue. Eastleigh is very fortunate that we've got the strategic land assets that provide us a solution. We're being far more proactive as a council than most of our neighbours. And particularly with the location of a couple of the SANG sites that we're considering, there is the opportunity for us to partner up with neighbouring authorities as well, where they can use our sites and charge developers accordingly. So it's all very positive from that point of view. Really, the update for this meeting and for Cabinet next month is that we're just refining the strategy and the detail, but very much the original plan is still there and still being pursued.
Lovely, thank you. we'll open it up for general questions on the report then. Don't all shout at once. I have one question. So is Appendix 1 shows the areas of land that have been acquired. I think it was Appendix 1. It looked to me like it linked all the way through from One Horton Heath and the land asset there through basically to Itchen Valley Country Park. I just wondered if we considered the scope of actually creating a link through there, A, to allow direct access to Itchen Valley from One Horton Heath, and B, to provide, I guess, a nicer route from sort of that part of the borough of Horton Heath through potentially even to Mansbridge as a potentially commuter route into the city, and whether that would be viable to look into.
Can I come in on that one? I think we're about 50 metres short of land holding to actually connect the Strat land with Itchen Valley. Although, is that Andy Granford I can see at the far end? Yeah, hi Andy. Andy has been talking to one of two landowners, I think, that actually could bridge that gap for us. But of course, they want some development on some land somewhere else in order to play ball on that piece of land. So I think it is possible. It's certainly an aspiration that everyone shares. At the moment, we don't have the tools in our box to deliver it. What we are going to be doing, though, is a lot of the land between Horton Heath and the Itchen Valley borders is going to be the new solar park. And there's going to be a lot of permeability around the edges of those field parcels, which would make it very easy if we do get that extra bit of land in the future to just jump across and have that connectivity that you just described. But at the moment, we don't quite have all the tools in the box to do it.
Right, thank you. So the possibility is being protected in
Yes.
case the gap is filled. Good. Any more questions on that one? No, I have a comment then. I think it's really positive that we're in this position, having had to scramble to work out what to do about this nitrate problem, to now be in a position where we've got a load of land that's paid for by the nitrates that we can now use for something else. I think it's actually really great, and it's good that we can explore all of these strategic projects for income and for the environment and for recreation. So I think we should note that. Good. If there's no more questions, then I propose we thank Clarissa and Chris and Andy, who's partly come for this for all their work on that. And we will, I guess, look forward to seeing those plans develop a bit more. So you're welcome to stay, but please don't feel that you have to.
Cheers.
No offence intended, but I probably won't stay.
Cheers, bye. Lovely. That takes us on then to item 7, which is the new housing policies, and I'm going to ask James to introduce that one.
Yes, well, sorry if I was jumping the gun slightly.
I like the enthusiasm.
Well, absolutely, yes. You've had a chance to review them because they were in the agenda for this week as an attachment. So there were the 4 which we've reviewed so far. The income management policy, the rent setting policy, the tenancy policy, and the housing management policy. And really, the statement I was going to read out, which pretty much stood in my group on the brief, was that Sue had kindly offered to be here this evening, by the way, and having discussed it briefly with you, Richard, and having a full agenda, and knowing that this is an ongoing process and we'll meet again tomorrow, we didn't really think it was necessary. I don't think she was particularly disappointed, but she had been very willing to come to this meeting, I should stress. And we're getting on well with her, and we're all being very open, and she's allowing us to do some of our slang language, which isn't as sophisticated as the language which the experts speak. So we did do a number of detailed amendments, clarifications, and these have been incorporated in all 4 policies. Overall, we'd hope that the final versions, there could be a little crisper. We appreciate that there is a need to balance EBC's commercial plan and objectives with sympathetic consideration for the needs of our tenants. However, some of the documents use a lot of words to express this balance, whereas the detail, which is so crucial, will be in tenancy agreements and processes which we have not yet reviewed. We would welcome, in setting rents, the energy efficiency of the properties to have some weighting. This is an incentive for Eastleigh Borough Council to provide even higher standards and to assist tenants who will have relatively higher energy bills. This should be less important with new builds, but as our desire is to build well ahead of government guidelines, there could be some variations. So we're not suggesting the whole of the rental is influenced, but a strand in determining rent could be how energy efficient is that particular property. And even in new builds, there is quite a lot of variation in standard and efficiency. And this is particularly, of course, thinking of what we do from our ground source heat pumps and all the rest of it. We're also aware that there are references to the HRAs, which are still in the process of finalisation, and other policies, such as the repair and maintenance standards, will be crucial to tenants' wellbeing and the reputation of EBC. We further appreciate that we must and wish to operate within the legal framework laid down by statute. We would have considered that in some situations a 6-month introductory tenancy would be more appropriate than 12, but that is what is required by law. We also considered on subletting, if well covered with the code of conduct and the tenancy agreement, the approval of the landlord should not really be required. However, that would depend upon the robustness of these documents, the tenancy agreements, the codes of conduct, and we acknowledge that officers' experience in this area should be respected. Therefore, we propose these 4 policies are adopted with the chance to look at them again when the full suite of documents has been published.
Thank you. Do you have any questions on this? There's a recommendation here that we just pass them on to Cabinet to be adopted implicitly. Any questions or comments? No, they're quite detailed and operational.
There is tension within balancing commercial interests and being respectful for tenants. And, you know, some points we're seeing Andy's remarks in the side column saying, hey, you know, more or less saying commercial reality has to be applicable here, and others was wanting to be compassionate, sympathetic, particularly when people get themselves in a fix of difficulty. And with our current crisis going on, there are quite a lot of folk in that situation.
Absolutely. Certainly my aspiration for us as a landlord is that we are showing best practice and we're doing something to alleviate all those problems that people in private rented accommodation often face.
But I don't want to extend the discussion, Richard, but just bring you on me. But it is a real quandary because you can get a reputation as a landlord for being a soft touch, an easy pushover. You know, it sounds heartless, but there are some times when you've got to be decisive and you've got to be disciplined and you've got to hold the line. I'm a director of a little rental property company, no properties in Eastleigh, I hasten to add. And, you know, you want to be compassionate, you want people who've lost their jobs through COVID or whatever, but there is a limit to how far you should go for other tenants in the area, particularly folks in Froome and Somerset. Think, you know, this guy's a pushover, got to get a balance.
Yeah, any comments or questions? I've not seen anyone wave. I think the suggestion that we pick this up once we've seen how it's actually working as a suite, and once it meets reality, so to speak, is a good one. And so
that's SUITE, not SWEET.
So that's what I think. So yeah, once we've seen how it's working, when do we expect the first tenancies to?
We've got some already, but they're new.
On 24,
Yeah, so I'm not sure when post office fits something. Yeah, at least a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll put that on we have an area on the work programme, which is things we don't know when to bring, but which we do intend to look at. So I think we'll add it in there. No, otherwise, thank you for your work on that. What I was going to suggest, because this is happening quite rapidly, I think it'd be difficult for them to find time in their diary, was that maybe we add 1 or 2 more people onto that group, so that there's some more heads to join in. So sure. I'm happy to volunteer if anyone else would like to.
Okay, 2 o'clock tomorrow.
There's definitely not. You're striking up.
Okay, good. I suppose the standing invitation is there if anyone wants to jump on any task and finish. You only need less than that. Sorry.
So I just want to make my apologies to the group because I've not been able to get to any of the meetings or read any of the documents. So I think adding an extra person onto the group is a really good idea. It's not through lack of interest, it's just sometimes it's just not possible.
Life, isn't it?
Life does get in the way.
Great. Good. I think we're done with that, and I suppose it just goes to us then. So, do we want, as the panel, to just endorse the spirit of that report that James gave, and say that we're happy with these to be approved by Catherine?
With the recommendation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Lovely. I think that's done then. Good. We can move on to item 8, which is our Q2 service performance monitoring, and I'll ask Lewis to introduce that one.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. So yeah, as you'll see in the report, the feeling is that performance is, we've moved from good in the last quarter to balance. I think balance reflects the challenging circumstances that we find ourselves in. I think there's still pockets of good performance, but there are areas that are needing some assistance, and plans are in place and support is needed into those services. I think it's important to acknowledge that we are in a challenging situation. I think, as the report states, some of our efforts are being directed to the continued improvement of services, and that's connected to the budget. I think, with that said, performance is still stable, and action is being taken to support those areas of challenge that I just mentioned. And there are some specific areas that have been highlighted in the report, and it becomes quite difficult to know which to highlight, to be honest, because they all could be highlighted. But we picked out things like the impact of Operation Bridge, the cost of living crisis, council tax in particular as a service area, and then there are some other specific service measures mentioned. I think just a little note to add that the recommendations that came to P&P in July and were approved in September will take effect in Q3. So whenever we get free to bring the monitoring to Q3, there will still see some threshold changes. We'll also see some measures being improved. So some of the areas that are perhaps slightly light at the moment, they should have some stronger focus, and you may remember the recommendations that we had in July, but they will come to Q3. And some of those thresholds will affect the performance that you see right now. So when we get to Q3, you'll see a revised performance for this level here, which is the sense of where we are. It's been implementation is fairly challenging. It's a large suite of data, as you can all see, based on the length of the appendices. But nothing really specific for me to highlight beyond what we've said. So really open for questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Well, I'm going to put just 4 things that sort of jumped out from the figures. That's okay. On page 160, start scrolling, please. Item 5.6. It's really just an observation. Final figure from March 22. It's corporate sickness hours, number of working days. It actually says it's red, but it's in green. So I mentioned that. I noticed about the comment that I would ask is that corporate sickness staff turnover seems to be getting worse. Is that possibly a sort of byproduct of the current uncertainty about jobs and things that these sorts of things very often are morale-based? I wonder if that's any research being done into that.
I think in terms of the position we're looking at now, I'd say that the current uncertainties, I guess, would have been previous to this, but over the summer period. I'd say that the increases that I've seen in turnover, we felt it had plateaued and sort of steady at this point. In terms of sickness, I think a lot of that relates to neighbourhoods, to be honest, and struggles in that area, particularly around longer term skeletal issues, which are actively being managed with HR support. So, yeah, that would be my comment.
On page 165, 0.06 is the NOT concentration monitoring site, which is still Southampton Road. It's really an evolution. It's just getting worse, not better. So maybe we better stop monitoring it again. Page 166, item 10. That doesn't seem to be recovering terribly well after COVID, does it? Is anything, can anything be done to improve those figures?
Yeah, so in terms of the occupancy, obviously the business centre, I know that's wrapped up in a wider conversation about the refurbishment and other issues with the house.
Yeah, I don't have a final answer for you, but we have just had back, but I haven't read it, the report from a consultant looking at the best way to refurb it, and obviously the cost is huge, but the benefit of the business centre is also huge. So it shouldn't be that much longer, and we'll come to cover it probably with the plan.
I think it's important to know that it's not a knock-on from COVID. 60, we are holding numbers back because we know that what we think we're going to have to do a refurbishment, we need to cancel it, so we don't have business. So it's been deliberately managed to get those numbers down. There is interest, but we're unable to do it at the moment.
And then page 167, what we've got written. 12B. Yeah, it's really slightly disappointing that the figure for people participating in arts and culture is actually going down. I'd be interested to know what figures here, how they obviously August 20 would have been a different one, August 21 might have been a different one. How do these figures compare with pre-COVID times? Do you know?
Yeah, so there is you say that the comparison is really about 2020. In terms of the specifics for arts and culture, I do know that August period is generally a maintenance season. They'll sort of have a fixed course close, whereby so long the events will stop. I will say that I mentioned the revised changes that come in for quarter 3. One of the amendments that we've made is moving from participation to throughput, and it'll have a very specific identification of what we're actually measuring within that. I think that will give a better indication. So I think it's not necessarily giving the best picture of what's happening in that service, and that's why I wanted to make the change that we proposed over the summer. So I'm hoping for Q3 the figure will look a little bit better. In terms of the comparison to pre-COVID, I don't have any charts as you've seen. It's not far back, but I can check and report back to use.
It would be interesting to know. Did you sort of vaguely assume that yes, August might be the time you do refits, but it's also the time when people might have time to go and do nice things. And talking going to do nice things versus leisure, that doesn't look terribly. The numbers have gone down again. Any thoughts about why that might be? What can be done to fuck it up?
Not specifically, to be honest. I can probably comment on. I would say that a couple of the others that factor into a couple of us that we may have mentioned this in the last discussion last time. Some of that is a little bit affected by COVID. I think it's probably not quite fair to say that for that leave. But I guess behaviours perhaps have changed because of course. People are taking their own habits. I suppose that's potentially one of the reasons why I've seen that figure. I'll have to check, but I'm pretty sure the threshold may be one that we've revised through the APR review that I mentioned. So performance may look slightly different, but nothing specific.
So, slightly question.
Slight update on that.
I mean, if it is possible that people's habits are changing, are we looking at places in the future? Because if people aren't using it and people's habits are changing, they won't come back to using it. Is it a rather large item that we're supporting if people aren't going to be using it?
I think the numbers did fall dramatically during COVID, that's true, but what has also happened in that period is the Village Hotel opened and had a big gym, big competition, and they have a lot of members into that. I know the operators are doing a lot of work around trying to build their attraction and up. So it's not necessarily a change that affects the whole kind of set of people are going back and kind of exercising things now. It's more at the moment. It's more around kind of competition and demand, but I think naturally some of that will balance out. There's lots of small operators, but it doesn't affect our income, does it?
No, because we get paid a management fee, so we get a percentage on any surplus, which we've never budgeted, but we get a paid management fee. So all the time that contract on the management fees concerns.
I only do there once a year, so I don't.
Very good. Well, you should go more often, and that would have
Thursday and May is quite enough for me.
That's almost 2 days.
Do you pay a lot, Lon?
I just want to understand the difference between, if you're thinking of changing the measure on 12B, so, because I think participation is really important, right? What would you class as the difference between participation and throughput?
Good question. So the change that we've got will still include participation. And what we're looking to do is report a combined figure with some specific breakdowns to show that it's. I guess the difficulty was, I think, from memory, but it will give us. So in terms of the reporting metrics for that one, there's no change yet in metrics. It's more around consistency across that service area. The other measures that we've got are considered to be throughput. So really all we're doing is changing the wording on that particular one, because what we're currently reporting is correct in terms of that participation in the activities that we're seeing. We're just changing it to throughput for consistency purposes on that one.
So if you're just changing the word, that won't change the metric.
No.
So if we see any change, it is because there's been a change. Okay.
Exactly that. And
So sorry. So why bother to change the word?
yeah, so the whole suite of changes that were agreed in July, we took that holistic view to say, well, where can we see consistency? And this was one of the areas where we were using different terminology. And so we wanted to introduce a consistent term to say throughput is how we measure our health and well-being services and such. That's the reason why it was added. Some of the other changes were bigger. They were more about actual metric changes and the measure themselves. This one was just a slight tweak as well. But the thresholds, as I mentioned in the previous answer, they will be updated based on position, and that was what we've been approved.
Okay. So I'm really struggling, yes, to understand, yes, by changing the word to throughput. What does throughput mean? Because does that mean if I turn up to one of the arts and culture centres and have a cup of coffee, that's classed as throughput? And I don't consider that throughput because I could have been going to Starbucks. I'm not doing any health and well-being. But actually, coffee makes me happy. But you know, it feels as if we're fiddling with words, yes, to no realistic difference, or I just don't understand.
Yeah, as I say, I think the recommendation was made over the summer for consistency purposes. That's the reason why it was put forward. In terms of what's included in that throughput, that it does include various aspects for the arts and culture service, which I can confirm specifically for the art and class use, but it will include visits through the reception area, the coffee shop you mentioned, actual activities that are ongoing, and the various programs that are offered. So, yeah, as I say, the wording is the change for consistency across that area, but I'm happy to provide the breakdown.
I think that would be really quite useful, because to me it seems like a really backward step. Because really what we want is people to hopefully participate in arts and culture. To turn up for a cup of coffee.
No, I would. That's where I disagree, because I feel, to be honest, for someone to be visual or be participate or come to a coffee house or something, but coming from health and well-being is taking off from that own house and participating in the town centre.
Should we include Starbucks then?
Yeah, so do we measure everybody turns up for a cup of coffee?
We should mention the Starbucks, but that's not within our corporate beer.
I would like to see what's in there.
Yes.
I can not be consistently have the cafe taken out of the KPI. On very much the grounds it didn't seem particularly cultural.
How about the use of our venue.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
approved. So it might be that you need two. One is really specific about participation, and the other is about the use of the venue. You might put that.
Yeah, and I think just at the nail on the head there, I think the reason for the change is to ensure that what you're seeing is more reflective of what it's measuring. We're not changing the measurement metrics from what was approved. Therefore, we're saying it's participation, it's actually a coffee shop. Was it incorrect? That's why we changed it to prove it, to be more reflective of what it was we're trying to achieve. But I agree, perhaps there is a separate.
Because if this figure includes people turning up for a cup of coffee, I'm being a bit blasé about the cup of coffee, but actually, I'm not happy about that. I'd like that separated. Being in the audience, that's participation. But just turning up on a Tuesday afternoon for a cup of coffee with my mate, I don't consider that arts and culture.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fine as a recommendation. Let's split participation.
We are due to have another review, which you kindly emailed me about, and I appreciate I haven't replied to. So I guess we can revisit some of these issues. Of course. Any more questions, comments, Alan?
Well, question, isn't it, and comment. Well, I mean, attendance at Point and Berry is green. Participation is in red, and that seems to me, that's on page 167, seems to be a bit of a contradiction. If we're getting people there, and that's attendance, which is percentage of capacity in the theatres, 12A, 12B, and 167, seems to be a little bit of a contradiction, because people are obviously attending, they're going to places, or places with both of them. I could add that traditionally we always had a dark season in August, because prior to COVID, a lot of people went away then. So there was less people around in the borough, and it seemed the logical time to do your maintenance when there was going to be less people around, rather than closing or shutting sections off in your busy periods. And that was traditionally a slight period, which is why we carried on. Some Cheryl's old talk, dark period, still lives on. But I'm interested as to the difference between those. A couple of other things. It is disappointing to see the figures at Places Leisure, especially for me, because all the work went into getting that. I'm sure Sarah did as well. The finances, that was one heck of a lot of work. So it is disappointing. Again, I would wonder whether that's liable to change because of the present situation we're in, where people are going to be spending less money. We're either going to see people, instead of going to see 3 times a week, going twice a week, or they're going to come out of the expensive places like Village Hotel and come back to Places Leisure.
It is more affordable. Places Leisure.
Yeah.
So it,
Well, that's why, I mean, I think at the moment, whether we need to gee up Places Leisure to be doing a little bit more advertising to try and get those people back, because it seems to me at the moment there's an opportunity with, because people haven't got so much free money to spend. And I also think, just a comment really, that with a high staff turnover, I'm thinking particularly in these waste collection and street scene areas, probably why we're having some of the performance problems there.
Actually, our turnover of staff, we're not having a lot of staff leave us in the waste service or the street service, struggling to recruit staff. I think there's a difference. Yeah. I think that's the challenge we've got in those areas. Although saying that now, in the last couple of months, probably 6 weeks, we've been quite successful filling vacancies in the waste area and in the street area. So during the summer, it was very difficult. Well, that was more the issue. We haven't, I'll be honest with you, we haven't got a lot of people leaving the service. That was really good news. Put my mind at rest. So, thank you.
Good. Steve, did you have another?
One observation, I'm really pleased I'm not a debtor of Eastern Borough Council, because although the figures improved slightly from budget basis, it's taken 2.5 years since we met our targets for paying invoices on time.
I don't know whether it's that is, but it's improved massively. hasn't
It
it?
has.
Massively improved. So what we've done is take it back to the finance team, retrained, reworked on it, and I believe the latest number is it is cleared almost instantly. So it is much, much better, and we're doing this same with council tax, but council tax is more tricky because you can't find staff. So there's a lot of work to be done on training, apprenticeships, training and career grades to get people into council tax and train them up to be able to do it. But part of that, definitely for council tax, which is a similar story, is we take it back to the specialist teams and they will control it and refine the processes and work it through. So you should hopefully, not next time, but shortly, in the same way as invoices, get that fed in and it will
Really.
Yeah.
It was discussed at the head this week,
Oh, good.
and they were going through.
Yeah.
It's the first one's really important.
Totally different story now, it's so much better.
I was going to ask about council tax, but it's nice to have that information. How much of the council tax inquiries that are outstanding because they have some complexity, and how much is outstanding just because the system is not at all self-service and everything has to be done by a member of staff?
No detail, practically.
Not really, but I'd say it's the volumes and that, yeah, complexity of queries, and it's just going off and resource being diverted elsewhere. In recovery staff and certain areas. So we did work on that.
Great. I think it's worth, not in this meeting, I'd like to discuss council tax and how that fits into the self-service and channel shift at some point, but not necessarily directly the thing on the finance and still with my usual complaints about service design and things. The only other thing that caught my eye was bins. Our favourite subject.
I'm here about parking.
I just dipped threads again after what had been an improvement.
Well, actually, the reason quarter 2 is never great because of holidays, and we've already mentioned about sickness. We have got high levels of sickness in the neighbourhood area, which we are dealing with but managing. But quarter 2 is never a great period. If you look back over the years, it always is a difficult one. And as I mentioned before, we did have a number of vacancies. However, we are filling those vacancies, and we are now starting to see, I think, the monthly APRs for last month agreed. So we are starting to see improvements, and I'm not going to say if it's going to stay that way. That would just be fate. But if everything carries on the way it is at the moment, then we should see a continued trend of performance improvement. And we have got some things in place around the longer term. So the regional managers and the people
Yes, thank you. Any more questions or comments on that item, Alan?
Something I forgot to people in temporary accommodation. How will this, I take it that's going to be in some way improved by the purchase of Brampton House and conversion into temporary accommodation. Although it's in my ward, I will say I can't think really of a much better place. It's so well served by public transport, close to schools, close to doctors. You know, people have got to be in temporary accommodation. I think that is in many ways an ideal site. But will those people that are going to be in there, where they're going to be managed flats, as I understand it, we'll still be counting that as temporary accommodation on these figures?
Question.
because it is going to be. Are they going to be living in somewhere where they've got their own front doors?
Well, to see clarity, it will depend on their tenancy. That will be the critical thing, whether it, unless they are being given their own tenancy, it will accommodation. I'll get that clarification for you.
But it'll be a completely different experience.
Yeah, it would be a lot better than bed and breakfast. But in previous times, we both to do housing and we used to have another authority, and we had our own hostels. So similar thing. That was all classed as temporary accommodation, even though it wasn't bed and breakfast.
But its capacity would be well more than 9, wouldn't it? I mean, we've got 9
Families.
families. It's got more than 9 units, isn't it? And some of them are singles.
30.
Huh?
30. Hey. There are 30 units inside.
30.
13.
13. Okay, and so that would completely take care of the problem. It's hovering at 9 and 10. And they would not be then regarded the same as possibly, depending upon the tenancy terms. I suspect some of those are Ukrainians, possibly in the 9-10s, are they?
Yes, they probably are now. There is a big issue with the Ukrainians being displaced at the moment, where their host families are obviously asking them to move on from the stuff. So we have got the Ukrainians in that.
Yes. I think we did have that. Right? Yes. Yeah, I think when I was chatting with somebody, I think there were 2 last week, Ukrainians, but I suspect within that number, and actually the numbers are very small, just take 2 off it would have been Amber, wouldn't it?
You might find that next quarter you've seen a bit of a peak due to the number of Ukrainian students.
Yeah.
Good. I think we're done with that one. Thank you. It's just to pick up what you said about the participation through debt. You said a little bit up with the review. You get clarity for everybody. Lovely. Lovely. Thank you. Item 9 then is around the new corporate plan, and I can ask Dickon to give us a further update on that with slides.
Many of you hopefully will be familiar with the current corporate plan 2015 to 2025, and feel the same about it as corporate leadership board, in that it's very out of date now, given some of the things we've heard about earlier this evening, the environmental schemes particularly, but also other issues, becoming a housing provider for private rental and affordable homes, and significant attention that we need to pay to changes to the waste service, which government are requiring us to bring in. So it was felt that we need to redo the corporate plan, and you'll note from the years on the screen that it's a shorter time period, and that's because really a 10-year plan is really difficult to plan. So it's a long time in our uncertain times. So a 3-year plan is what we're going to go for. I've just got some slides that set out some of the principles and a little bit of the draft content, or the themes and categories that we might apply to the structure of the document. And I'll be very keen to hear your thoughts about the structure and the principles behind the proposed plan, and any ideas about the content as well. Obviously, staff are working on that, and we're aligning it with the financial planning of the council to understand exactly what we're going to be able to deliver in the future. But this is an opportunity for you to feed in, and the draft plan will come back to you in February time for your on the full document. We wanted to be clear about the purpose of the document, because this kind of thing can look very pretty and then sit on the shelf and not do very much. So it's really important that we understand what it's for, what its purpose is, and you can see some of the principles there. We want to be able to tell a story about the organisation in its current times, and councils are organisations that have so many different objectives and drivers, and this is a kind of document that can give some cohesion to the group and make it all feel like it's one thing. It's one organisation delivering a lot of different services, yes, but doing it in a sort of unified and coherent way. The document has the potential to support our prioritisation on decision making, as well as actually getting stuff delivered on the ground. And of course, this is a sort of a top level plan document for all sorts of other things, the local plan, funding bids, all sorts of other things that the council will be involved in. So what's the story that we're seeking to tell in the document? It's got to be something that says easily, doesn't it? Because otherwise it's just like any other corporate plan that any other council will have. We want it to be distinctive. And we want to remain ambitious, but perhaps be a little bit more circumscribed about the way we use that word. Ambitious in our effectiveness and in our focus, given the financial challenges that we've got, but still pushing the boundaries on certain issues like housing and the environment. And you'll see that in the plan later on. Of course, there are external threats. The funding situation that we're going through at the moment is a key one. Obviously, we'll continue to deliver projects and services, such as ones and those discretionary ones that we can afford to deliver. There's a strong desire to see the local in this plan, delivery at local level, local priorities, local distinctiveness. There. We're not going to have time to do a huge amount of number crunching, but we do want to understand the headline information, what the state of the borough is, and what the state of the council is in terms of the outputs that we're currently delivering for residents, and say a little bit about our businesses as well as our residents. I'm sorry. We'll be illustrating the document with some of the things that we've done, the projects, the infrastructure that we've built, and our achievements over the last 7 years since the beginning of the current corporate plan. And that helps tell the story and give the document distinctiveness for its audience. And it's important thinking for a moment about who that audience is. It's an external document, so it's to help our residents who we serve to understand what the council's plan is, but it's also for staff so that they can understand the story that the council is telling itself and feel a part of that and understand their place in achieving hopefully some great things over the next 3 years. So the picture there is supposed to be foundations. So the council's positioning is a lot of the time not to deliver services ourselves, although of course we do that, but we are an enabler. We lead our communities, we set things up, we provide infrastructure that other organisations, the voluntary community sector then pick up. So that's the story there. The document needs to bring together our mission, our purpose, the vision for the council and the values with which we deliver those services and projects. And we want to continue to be distinctive and show that leadership and housing and environmental issues are good examples of that leadership. Clearly, we're not going to be able to do as much as we would like to do, but there is a strong business case and really good examples we heard earlier on about nitrates and phosphates and other things. But there's a strong business case we're able to do that. We need to work with others to achieve a lot of the things. We're not able to just do it ourselves. So how do we structure all of the things that we do, what we like to do over the next 3 years? These are the themes, the working themes and their working titles. And you can see some resonance there with the council's mission of supporting communities and improving lives. And we have a strong place-shaping role, and the environment and the housing categories are significant ones for the council, and therefore I might argue they stand alone as things. The current corporate plan doesn't really say very much about our own organisation. It's very outward facing, and that was seen as a bit of a gap by many people. So we've adjusted that, and we've got a separate feed for ourselves. One might say a little bit examining our own navel, but actually, if we don't get our own organisation right, we're not going to get the first 40 people's right. So I've just got 5 slides setting out in sketch form what the kind of things are that will be included in each of those themes or categories. So supporting people is about customer-facing services where the customer is usually a resident or perhaps a business. We've got our statutory services there, homelessness, housing standards and benefits, others discretionary services, all of our customer care work sits there, skills and jobs, and also our partnerships. Shaping role I mentioned, so this is a lot of local area content here, and also our local area response and engagement officers. Again, Freeport, so aspects of the economy that relate to the place, so Freeport is clearly one of those. Country Park and local centres. And enforcement and policy. These are all services that council has to shape the places that we live. Environment, energy very high up the list there. A significant new energy schemes for heat and other energy provision. And our climate and environment projects there seeking to change behaviours so that we reduce our carbon footprint as quickly as we can. All of the list, but there's very obvious environment there. Creating homes and communities, so not just the houses, but the infrastructure to go along with it. And this is the field in which our new private rental and affordable housing services will sit. These are one. And this one are organisation, so user facing services like case management, case security, IT, so on. So just 3 slides to go. So each of those sections will have this kind of layout. So where are we now? Understanding our current position, where do we want to be, what is our future position, and then what are we going to do, how are we going to get to our future position, how are we going to achieve that, those things. And also weaving into all of these areas, what's the local angle? What do we do particularly on people, on communities, on places, on housing, environment, who are local. The document will have some form of action plan. That's not been exactly confirmed what that will look like. Similar to the corporate action plan that some of you will be familiar with, that's gone through this committee several times. It's an annual action plan, but it will be a 3-year one that is reviewed and renewed annually. Just the high-level actions, and we will do our best to meet the demands of this committee to be as smart as possible with that. So we've got some measures. How do we know if those actions are going to be successful or not? And finally, this is the timeline. So there's been some engagement already with Corporate Leadership Board. Sorry about all of the acronyms. Corporate Leadership Board last month, executive heads, local area managers, December and January is going to be a time of more sort of work on the content and opportunity for a wider group within the council to comment, and then come through cabinet members informally at management liaison, and then back to you in February and approval alongside the budget.
Lovely, thank you. Questions, comments on this?
It's rare I'm stuck to words, isn't it? The one thing that didn't seem to be in there that I would expect to see in there is about being a financially sound council. And there was no mention of that. Now, I know this committee does not worry, clearly does worry about money. But, A&R deal with that, but it feels like that is missing because we could do all those other lovely things and fall over.
I think we had a previous working party for one of the themes, which was explicitly about sound finances. But needs to be widened because it's other stuff internally that talks about how people strategy, recruitment, and retention, for example. And I don't think many people in the council can escape the financial imperatives around it at the moment. So I can fully reassure you that that will be written very strongly in the document.
Cool, excellent, thank you.
What the office wants in 3 years after short. So is it going to be a rolling 3-year plan? Because that's what's obviously going to be. It's going to be a rolling plan.
Great, that leads on to one of mine then. So at the moment we have got the corporate action plan, which is a 1-year plan. Are we still going to have a corporate action plan and this rolling 3-year plan? Okay, so the cap goes away. I'm thinking, gosh, some more action plans. And then one question around values, and I like that we all make values explicit because values are really important. And I wrote my PhD thesis about values. I didn't see quite what the values were likely to be or how they will be articulated.
So we have current values which are fairness, empowerment, and ambition, and those are the ones that we'll start with. I am aware that Jen Straw is interested in having a think about whether those are the right ones for us at the moment and possibly changing them. But I don't think there's any question about that being a sort of key component of the document and trying to make that a useful way of driving right ways of working. I need some behaviours, but I won't say that.
Okay.
We're not having behaviours.
It's just the language rather than.
So I can behave how I like. I do already.
And then I suppose my other question is, we know we likely have to make some changes around how the organisation is structured and the teams we have and how work is done. We've got some areas in the proposed corporate plan. What's the expectation around how those different threads relate to how the organisation is structured? And like, where will the ownership be?
It's always difficult to get that kind of alignment. We've tried to align things in the past to have a portfolio, and that hasn't always worked. So I think we're always in a position where a number of different parts of the organisation contribute to a strategic theme and a strategic outcome. So if you're familiar with that, I'm comfortable with that. The way we develop the action plan and assign chunks of it to people will be a critical stage to make sure that it all joins up and people are contributing in that way. They're component part of the environment objective will have a contribution for all, the contribution from planning, environment side and so on.
It is to try and not to kind of recreate silos.
Yeah. Good. No, I'm happy with that. And then I just thought of something else. Oh, in terms of timeline, this is expected to come back February along with the budget. Is that just the strategy, or does that include the first stab at the action plan items within it? Because that seems ambitious.
Yeah, I don't think it will be, to be fair. I think in an ideal world, I think the detail of the action then.
Okay.
Particularly this is 3-year plan.
Yeah.
So we'll have quite a good idea of our next year. Okay.
Okay. Okay. I think it's it's exciting to have an opportunity to revisit stuff. It's certainly that current corporate plan predates quite a lot of us. As actually being on the council, so I think that's exciting. And I think you're right with the uncertainty that it's nice to regroup and work out what it is we want to do. So I'm looking forward to see it develop. I suppose in terms of feedback, we can go away and think about this. Is email comments the best way to put things in? Good.
And sorry,
just saying on that one, could you share the presentation?
certainly.
Yeah, it's going to be on YouTube as well. But
Could I just say, Director, as you're all local area committee members, that's another route in. I was always thinking broadly about council and the borough as a whole. If you have particular ideas about the local areas, because that is very key to see the local area strands running very strongly.
yeah, absolutely. That LAC element I think is important because especially we have projects in LACs and we'd like to drive forward and see how they align. I think there's probably been a sense from various people that we'd like to reinvigorate the LACs to some extent. So there seems to be opportunity to do so.
The last plan essentially was bolted from the end, and that's what we've done. I wanted to be really clear all the way through how either LACs are contributing or how we can help empower the resources we need to. So it's
Okay. That sounds positive. So we'll see the finished one, whatever state it's in come February, and we'll try to engage, I guess, informally up until that point. So ideas to do.
Can I also actually ask if you those 2 principles, when you're sending your ideas to rules of the year, various different actually leave this on second. It's quite good for different. But he is leaving us. So if you copy me in as well, that'd be very helpful. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank you for being a really key part of this committee for a long time, actually. And really helpful.
And we know where you're going, Dick?
I'm going to citizens advice.
Oh, gosh, in what capacity?
I'm a performance and risk manager, but I'm working from home, so I don't have to go up to London to do 3 times a week.
Excellent. Oh, good luck. And thank you.
Congratulations.
Yes, absolutely. I'll second what Natalie said. When she came and said, right, we want to do scrutiny a bit better, you've been a real friend of this community. So thank you for all the work and stuff. Enough of that. Our last is citizens advice again. Fabulous. Thank you. I think we're done on that item. That takes then we've done item 10. Already on to item 11, which is the agency agreement changes. And also verbal report. So I'm going to ask Paul to introduce that.
Yeah, just that, and I'll introduce it over and to Rob. He's done a lot of work on it. I think most members are aware that the current agency agreements that we have with Hampshire County Council for on-street parking and traffic management are returning to Hampshire County Council at the end of March next year, which means we will no longer have responsibility for delivering those services, and there will be implications for pretty much everybody in this room, but certainly for the local areas. So this really is to give an update on what some of those impacts will be, and also to say we now need to start sharing this information with members of the LFCs because it's really important. The LFCs do understand what they're planning. And now I'm going to hand over to Rob and we'll support and give.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Right, I'm going to hopefully this will work. It says, George is not working. Oh, look at that. I'm just going to don't worry.
Oh, that's a bit fancy. Yes.
That's the only slide that's got that on.
Somebody thought they were at the point again.
I did. I'll do it in the end. Okay, so yes, this is an update to everybody. As Paul rightly said, so we know with those agency agreements that we've got, particularly traffic management and the on-street student parking enforcement, is a mouthful. The implications to our local residents, our local businesses, and we can discuss further, obviously, at this meeting as well, how we're going to communicate those changes out, not only to our residents, businesses, but also to the communities as well. So, I think I've got a bit of this next one. So, let's see what happens. No, it's just a slide. Sorry about that. Okay, so moving from EBC to Hampshire from April next year. I will go through them because they're a bit interesting when they ask me. So anything related to height, speed, weight limits that we currently undertake will be wholly undertaken by Hampshire next year. Any restrictions for HGVs, LGVs will also be undertaken. Any road classifications, now we don't do too many of those, but that's when we have any new roads, if it's an A road, B road, any other road, that will be undertaken wholly by Hampshire. Any of our movement restrictions, if we want to introduce any new left turns, any one-way systems, etc., any bus gates we might want to introduce, that will be undertaken by Hampshire as well. The road closures, if we do any stopping up orders, any gating, that's probably undertaken by Hampshire. On this next one, I would ask the room actually, I've missed one of these crossings off. I've listed zebra, pelican, puffin and toucan. As it opens the floor, which one have I left out?
Why are you looking at me? Elephants.
Well, it's not.
A zebra's not a bird.
Yeah, there is one missing.
Again.
So we've got zebra, pelican, puffin and toucan. And there's also another crossing I've missed off deliberately. So it's actually Pegasus.
It's not a bird.
No, exactly. It's flying. But you're right about horses. But it's actually for a horse, well, not for a horse, for the horse rider. I mean, the horse could do it. Where you have a zebra crossing, we know a zebra, black and white lines with a flashing light. Pelican crossings are the signal control, they're being phased out now, they're a bit out of date. Puffins are the newer pelicans, and that stands for, actually stands for something, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's something to do with more technology. They have this signal readers on top that, if you know them, you press the button right away, like used to, they won't change the light. Toucan, you know what that is, that's toucan cross, and that's for bikes and pedestrians. The Pegasus is a raised button, so a horse rider can stop the traffic. There you go. I am full of useless.
And there's also no flashing amber light.
That's a very good point. You're absolutely right. Yes, because the amber flashings are only on the Pelicans. That's right.
It's all right. I'm reading Google.
I'll quiz you more later. So any modifications to existing on-street parking restrictions, that's obviously a lot of fun that we do at the moment, that will wholly stop. We'll talk more about that in a second. Any general inquiries, of course, relating to highways, traffic management will be through to Hampshire from April. If we introduce any new TROs, traffic regulation orders for permanent restrictions, that will be fully from Hampshire. Any on-street disabled persons parking places, that includes those outside of people's residences. The residential parking scheme will be fully administered by Hampshire, still using my permit. This is the use of resident scheme at the moment. And of course, one of the big ones, the on-street enforcement. So all the penalty charging agencies will be wholly undertaken by Hampshire from April, using their contractor, MSL. We can talk a bit about that in a second. The elements that are retained by us, so the enforcement is anything in the car park, so our car park off-street management of those car parks, etc., and enforcement and recovery, and so forth, that will maintain with easily. We do have some resident parking in our car park. Southampton Road car park and Hamble Square. We'll be reaching out and doing some comment on that later. I'll talk about that in a second. Road closures for public events, EBC and drainage, maintenance of those structures, of a little bit speed, a bit reminder signs. I think that's right, yeah, I can't think of the items. Those stay with us. Street naming and numbering, football diversion, station chairs, Christmas lights, traffic management works on EBC owned land, And the HTC design agency work, that's, I think if we still want to introduce something that's fairly minor on behalf of Hampshire, we can still do that work. That's correct. And the CCTV and the banned vehicles element that I look after at the moment, that will retain the DBC.
Can I ask a question, or would you prefer we wait to the end?
Question as we go along, I'm happy.
So if we're still maintaining the car park enforcement, yes, and presumably we'll lose quite a few staff because now it's going to be, are we going to just keep one member of staff to do?
So in terms of staffing, there is a 2P arrangement that's being worked on at the moment with Hampshire, so our HR teams and their HR teams are working on it. We do have some vacancies at the moment, and it's unlikely we'll lose any staff as it stands. We will need a number of civil enforcement officers still to maintain enforcement in our car park. It will be more than one, it is quite a few that we need to cover the whole borough. Part of our ongoing and developing parking strategy work, it may be that we have new sites coming online in the future anyway, so we need to make sure that we keep those resources for those car parks.
Okay.
So yes, as it stands, there shouldn't be a change at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. What is the minor design dictated from behalf of Hampshire?
Yeah. So that actually might have written by that.
Is that the design agency? Yeah. So at the moment, there's some things that Hampshire might ask us to do. So because, to be honest, if it's a small scheme, they, in the nicest possible way, can't be bothered doing it. So if there's a small scheme, they may will still ask us to do it and actually pay us to do that. There's also the option where the local area committees may want a small scheme delivered within their local area, and Hampshire may not object to that. You may be happy for that to go ahead, and we would decide that we'd have to get a license from them to do it, if you will. But it's something that may help the local areas to actually deliver some small local schemes, because Hampshire doesn't say go the same money because they're only going to do things that they can make their money. That's something which we're discussing with them to see how that will work. Because we are conscious, if we don't take that on, or if we're not able to offer that, then potentially in a lot of the local areas we will not be able to deliver any schools. What's happening to us?
Thank you. Excuse me. I didn't know that. I was just seeing if you No, of course, I've changed I've pressed the button on my laptop. There we go. That changed, there we go, happy day. So the timeline for change, I'll actually talk about the right-hand side initially, that's the traffic management side. So in May and June, Tony Johnson, who looks after that side of it, was working with the local areas to work on the priorities and scoring for those final TROs that we need to get in. And we set that full programme in the summer as well. Following on from that, we're continuing our service planning for the delivery of the main functions within neighbourhoods, fair to say. And what's coming up, the big push next, I suppose, is the communication strategy that we'll be working on with the parking side. So some of the things we need to do on the parking side is exactly that, communications, especially out to our residents, that's quite important. We need to transfer some actual data over to Hampshire as well. That's an interesting one. I'll come back to it if I need to, but that's to do with particularly resident data. Any penalty charges that we issue will remain with us over the overlap into 23-24. A penalty charge notice, excuse me, can last up to 18 months in law for us to recover it. So there is going to be some overlap. Obviously, anything we issue in March next year, we need to work out exactly how that's recovered. But Hampshire are fully on board with that. And shared, so I've got new glasses, that's why I can't see the screen. So shared contracts need to be severed and terminated, and that includes anything we've got through from our enforcement software, our cash collectors, we collect the coins out of the ticket machines, and our cashless provider, which is Bingo, who look after our cashless options in the car parks and on street. So some implications as we go forward, just so you're aware of these. we've had conversations with Hampshire County Council. The intention is for some or all on-street limited waiting to be removed, potentially replaced with main display parking. That includes to place that into new areas where there is currently no control. They have indicated to me that some on-street paying display could be cashless only, so only bingo. So that's removal of ticket machines. NSL enforcement is generally going to be mobile based. They've indicated to me they'll be based from Winchester initially. I'm not quite sure how often they'll be visiting these things. That remains to be seen. Of course, public and councillors alike will have to approach Hampshire for any hotspot enforcement. Take it a moment, for example, school enforcement. Any on-street suspensions and waivers, dispensations, will be fully charged for by Hampshire County Council. Going forward, in relation to any TROs, any local issues will have to be scored on safety by Hampshire, and some of those could be income-led, hence the introduction of pay display. We think the Borough Council will have to approach Hampshire County Council councillors for any traffic management requests. They have indicated to us that all schemes will have to operate on a full cost recovery. And importantly for us, we'll need to keep our dialogue open, especially on setting of fees and charges. Because obviously anything we do with our car parks could influence on street and particularly important and vice versa. That's some of the implications we need to consider going forward. Might be the last slide. That's just some names. There we go. I think you know who we are. So I'll go back to that particular one, but any questions, certainly welcome.
Lovely. Thank you. Any questions, comments on this one? Steve?
So, on the basis that the borough councillors will have to approach HCC councillors, then that means effectively that if someone rings me up and complains about parking, say, hot sauce, I can take it up with the county councillor, but if they rang Councillor Marsh, she'd have to pass it to me to approach Hampshire. Is that the way it would work?
Potentially, yes, especially for anything that's particularly related to traffic management, so like a new restriction, for example, so new yellow lines, or if it's a resident parking scheme that might need to be considered. I think that probably would be the best approach. If it's a general enforcement inquiry, for example, Hampshire do have an online portal. It's going to be a bit like what we do. We have that when you go online, you raise a case, legal or not, so just like what we do, so everybody uses that. And with that, we'll get through to the enforcement team, but I don't actually know how that interface will work between raising that inquiry and then out to NSL in practice. I think we'll have to see how that transpires.
I think lots of people know already it's happening. So I think there's a sort of resigned acceptance. So that ought to make the communications thing a little bit easier. I suppose it depends how much detail you want to the public actually need, really. Because most of their complaints are going to be about people parking outside their house.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. On the communication strategy, we'll be looking at some drip feeding, if you like, from kind of December, January onwards. There'll be some splash in the borough news. Of course, Hampshire have their own communication strategy as well, so we'll try and dovetail those two together. We're also going to be giving our own CEOs some handouts, some small leaflets, to give out to the public if they get questions. Well, one of the things that's going to be interesting is that our own CEOs are going to be walking past illegally parked vehicles and won't be able to enforce them. So that's an interesting situation to be in. And likewise, NSL, if they're near a car park, they won't be able to go into that car park to enforce anything. So you'll see officers on the ground who have similar looking uniform, but will be uniform obviously for different purposes, different councils. We don't know what colour their uniform will be yet. We're mostly black and white, really. We could review that going forward, but we need to have our own identity, of course. So,
Did you share the presentation?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think in particular with the when we've got the green squares as it comes up, in particular too with the green one and the red one, that's quite important, and I'll try and make that as part of this kind of handout as well. So we'll share that out to the actual council.
Any more?
There's a slightly curious following on from Stephen's communication front, we've got county councillors and borough councillors. So in this review method you're doing of LACs, I'm beginning to think that we're beginning to find ourselves potentially a lobbying group to go to Hampshire County Council to get things done. And I mean, it's curious because you've got a county councillor and then you've got, it seems to me, if somebody raises a street issue, you know, single yellow line or whatever, and it's raised by a few residents and it's given to one councillor and they pass the buck to Hampshire. Not actually very meaningful, but if it is discussed at the LAC and every LAC councillor says, yeah, we've got to do something about that, it's an accident waiting to happen and blah, 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 that has more impact. But is that a legitimate process?
Well, surely the local area committee can pass, there will probably be a county councillor on the local area committee, the way things happen. So you can still discuss it with the local area committee, and then it has to go to Hampshire rather than Switzerland. That's
Doesn't have more impact if it's been discussed and all of that committee or the majority of that committee say, hey, we've got to do something.
County councillor acts as the representative spokesperson for the local area committee, just to a different council.
Yeah,
Can I just say, yeah, clearly it's raised by the local area committee and local county council then takes it to Hampshire. The thing to bear in mind though is that Hampshire, and I'll use yellow lines around schools. Okay? Because often that's the county will only do it if its schools are from a safety point of view. So they will look at it first and foremost. So if it's causing disruption for people parking in their schools to drop children off, if it's not a safety issue, they won't score it highly. And that's what needs to be understood in that sense. It's safety that they will really look at because they're only interested in really keeping the highway moving and safe. And then the other side of it will be income. So if it's not really going to cover its costs, then they won't look at it. It won't score as high. And I think it's just really, it needs to be understood that. Because I'll be really open and honest here. We have a lot of yellow lines in East. And the county recognise that. And they say we've got a lot of yellow lines compared to other districts. So it is worth bearing in mind that's their view at this moment in time. So I'm just trying to be honest. I don't want people to think everything will continue in the way it has done in the past because it's highly unlikely. I think, you know, that I'm quite happy in the new year, early part of the new year, to come around and do a similar presentation to all of the LACs, because I think it's really important the LACs understand what's going to happen. Because at the moment, the LACs have a lot of influence on what goes on in the local area in terms of TROs, lines, enforcement, and all of those things. That isn't going to continue. And I just want to try and be honest with people and get it out.
That's a really good point. Well, I think, and correct me if I'm sure I heard a statistic that we normally do more in Eastleigh every year than is done in the whole of the rest of the county combined. So that it just shows how dramatically the level of TROs are.
The TROs that happen in Eastleigh is more than
Out of curiosity, so of all those yellow lines, yes, how many of them do we actually enforce? Because there's a bit how long's a piece of string. Because I do wonder if actually we just keep putting yellow lines in and nobody has the time to go and look at them.
Rob will add more to this. We'll enforce all of them, but around schools, and this, you know, I drive a car. A lot of people hear that people will sometimes park or drop something off, sit in the car, and if they see an enforcement officer walk around the corner, they drive off, won't they? You know, and I'm just being, you know, I'll be honest, I've done it. And I think a lot of people do that because that's people's behaviours. So whilst the people, you know, Rob can only enforce what they actually catch. And you can't enforce, I think you're right, Rob will say this, you can't enforce just because you see somebody drive off. You've literally got them.
I think I was meaning a slightly different issue. So for me, I use Kenilworth, Boswell.
Yep.
Constantly getting requests to put double yellow lines in at top of Boswell, on Burt Lane, and there's been me that thinks, why we've never done it, but if we did, how often would we be able to send an officer to watch it? And therefore, really, what's the point in putting it on the yellow line?
It is a great question because we have an awful lot of our lineage is not necessarily enforced. The line actually serves its purpose, so we don't actually need to go before. So tariffs will be quite powerful in a lot of locations, not all locations. So where we have a stretch of road that has a particularly long meterage of yellow line, if there isn't particularly anything there for people to go to, so there's no cash points, there's no coffee shop, no bank to go into, we don't really get those kind of instances. You might get the odd one or two, but generally it might just be a loading vehicle, a delivery driver, which is across the top of their line. So they do have an impact, especially on the type of road, because it keeps that flow of traffic, which is quite important. But parked cars can also help because obviously slow traffic down, it's naturally traffic calming. But where we have the most problems generally, it's where you have the cash points in the bank. But obviously, town centre is the obvious one, because we have that continual abuse of the restrictions. So we do try to focus on sources where the problem is. But we will go anywhere. And there's a phrase I hear the police use it a lot. You know, we can't be everywhere all the time, but we could be there some of the time, or something like that. Probably is, but basically we can tell at any time. If we see it, we enforce it. So we have the mobile-based officers who are driving around the borough all the time, and if they see something, they will stop and enforce it. So, but it's interesting how that will go moving forwards with NSL, because I don't know at this stage what their resourcing will be for Eastleigh. I don't know if it's 2 officers, 20 officers, for example, something like that. I just don't know. They are having issues with recruitment, just like we are, because it's difficult to get NSL officers recruited. That's an industry problem anyway, so NSL is not linked to that. So we will see. But if they're based in Winchester for Eastleigh, I don't know how often they're going to visit, but I just don't know.
I think it will depend on how much cash they think they can have.
Anywhere they will go to will be where the penalty charges can be issued.
Okay.
That's where it's at.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I suppose if you're not losing any staff, as you said, but you're losing responsibility for an awful lot of street parking, that means anybody parking, not buying a ticket in a Eastleigh Borough Council car park has a bloody good chance of getting caught.
Yes, again, that's an interesting one about resourcing, because if there's intense resourcing from Hampshire on the streets, that's good in respect, because that's what they should be doing. And when I say enforcing, I'm being present, you know, not necessarily giving out a notice. But of course, if that drops down, then people, of course, naturally will actually think, well, actually, I can park on the street and not pay or whatever anyway. In which case, our users of the car parks could park on the street rather than on car parks, which from an enforcement point of view is one thing, but of course, that's not the money for our ticket machines. So, yes, it links to the same kind of problem. It's the fact that you have to show that enforcement is consistent and high enough, if you like. And we need to mirror that in our car parks. But the number of officers that we will have spread across the borough and allowing for planned and unplanned absences, we won't be saturating the car parks, but there will be a good presence. So, and that's what the company expect. But believe it or not, it's not about putting the penalty charges, and we want to be helping the customers, of course, in the car parks, and that's what we do pretty well. But if people don't pay to park, then our officer will try them.
It's very cool. Seems to me that some of this is we've been very good at putting double yellow lines where corners on the 10-metre limit where it's illegal to park anyway, but only the police can enforce that. Now there is talk that the government are going to put that out sometime in the very future to councils, which is what I think is what Hampshire are banking on, because they will then be able to enforce no right turns, that sort of thing, and people parking in 10 metres of the junction, they'll be able to take action because it's against the highway code, but no police can do it. So if their enforcement is going to be good enough, which I get. Because they'll be doing purely on finance. And I'll have them to look at the problem. Where they start removing the time limited waiting. Because there are lots of areas, we particularly get it in Chelmsford with an industrial estate. You bring the time limited waiting in because otherwise the residents can't get in and out of their own roads because they just be full of people parked all day. That I think is something that worries me more, and it's something that's going to have to be conveyed to residents. I think that is going to be a big expectation, and that will continue. We'll no doubt take the blame when it isn't.
Well, yes, and that's an interesting point because we need to get our comms correct because there is going to be blame game for the better phrasing in terms of who's responsible for some of these things. The limited waiting is difficult to enforce as to whoever's enforcing it, so I can sort of understand why Hampshire looking at those, but yeah, there'll be some changes there. And some of the things you referenced there is moving traffic enforcement, which is a new thing coming in. That's new laws and legislation which only the county can do anyway. And they will be looking to do that post-April as well, including at some sites in East Leeds, including block junction enforcement by camera. That we can't, there's nothing to do with that. But, yes, to look at those cameras.
I've one question, which I suppose is, I want to try and generalise it in case it generalises. There are clearly some places in the borough with particularly challenging parking events, and I think in particular in Western for the GS Bowl. And clearly we have a large amount of sort of organisational knowledge about A, what the problems are, and B, some approaches we've tried to fix it. What's the indication from Hampshire County Council about what they plan to do about those particularly acute and difficult issues?
That's not very general, but we are currently having a discussion with the GSB and with the county around the GSB. There's an approved traffic management plan for the GSB, which the county signed off on. The GSB don't only follow that approved plan. The GSB would like to do less than is in that approved plan.
Do you do less?
Yes, I think it's fair to say we do. We aren't going to be able to influence that post April next year. So at the moment we're trying to get the county and the GS together to say this is the problem we've got. Is that approved plan? We don't think it's adequate anyway, from local knowledge. The GSO complied with the approved plan, and actually we both need to sit down and agree what is going to happen. Because we know local residents have a real problem with it. So that's something which we are trying to get both in the same room to have that conversation. That's something we're working on. So where we know there's a problem, we need there's one around the football club. So where we know there's a local problem, at the moment we're trying to actually get parties together to do something about it. But it's, I'll be honest, it's very difficult. And we know the AGs look at it from the cost point of view. County will only look at it from the point of view of keeping the highway open and running. Anyone, and I've obviously from Hedge End what you all know, if you're trying to get up here for a meeting when there's a match on, a big event, you pretty much experience one everywhere. And that's another problem. But county see that's a short-term problem. As long as the highway is pretty that's their policy to keep the highway open. So we do need to get them together to actually talk. It does affect local residents. Yeah. So we'll try to do it before it gets to March.
Okay. Well, that's not usually reassuring, but
it's not reassuring, but I think we go on. Yeah, absolutely. The only other thing I was going to mention, currently, as quite a few councillors will know, we often have issues getting our waste wagons into various roads because of parking, and we have put lines down for that reason. We're not going to go to do that in the future. So just to be aware, at the Well, they tend to just go through. And our wagons are big enough and ugly enough to just go through, but the problem is the
Sure.
Okay, good, right, thank you for that. It's good to know what's happening, even if it perhaps a little bit depressing. But there we are. So thank you for coming and telling us about that. I'm not seeing anyone else waiting, so I think we'll move on. That takes us to cabinet forward plan, which we'll do with our own work programme. So they fit quite nicely together. I did have a look through the cabinet forward plan. I didn't see anything imminent that we want to add to our work programme. Been asked to do. We're going to have to change the work programme for the start of next year a little bit. There's some stuff in January that won't be ready. And then we've got what looks like quite a busy February meeting. So I think we're going to see what we can do.
On the subject of January's meeting, I just realised I won't be here. So I don't know if that would be putting the task of finish report back a month. Unfortunately, there's no further stuff.
Realistically, it would be March, because February is difficult, but yeah, we can do that, absolutely. Even less to do January. No, going to do the 9th? Are you going anywhere nice?
Yes, London's early Thursday.
Lovely, well, you're thinking here then.
Just don't bring me up if
Okay, no one else is waiting about the work plan. I think that means we're done. It remains to say that our next meeting will be Thursday the 12th of January, back here, and I'll see you in the new year then.
Just out of curiosity, you said at the beginning of the meeting it was being recorded on the EC website. Do we have any figures for how many people sit down with a bucket of popcorn and votes and watch these things? 400?
If you go on YouTube, it does show you the number of. I did have a little look the other day. It was not a very high number.
No.
That's much the same for Hampshire, isn't it, when they record their meetings?
I just wondering what you dress up in.
We'll have a phone in, so you can get voted off the committee. Right, thank you.
Thank you.